guys, so I just wanted to share my top 6 opening traps that I think are going to be very, very useful for you if you are, especially between anywhere below 1000 elo, anything below that, up until 1500, 1600 elo. These are my 6 favorite traps that have really helped me progress up to where I am now. So these are by no means the only traps, and I would invite you to go and look up videos, by better teachers. I'm not a teacher, but people who can actually explain some of this better. I'm just showing you the quick, run through with each of these traps. So hope you enjoy it, and yep. All right, guys. So we're gonna start with my personal favorite opening trap, which is the Caro-Kann, the two knights attack. This one I have to give credit to the Chessbrahs, which is where I picked this up. Yeah, honest to God, I think that if I were to look up the number of games that I won by a really quick checkmate, it would have to be up in the 40s or 50s, I would say. So mostly this is going to be effective in bullet and blitz, but that's kind of the case for a lot of the traps, just because people, if they don't know the trap, they're not going to necessarily have the time to think about it. So let's take a look at this. You're going to be bringing the two knights out in response to Caro-Kann. We're not going to look at if they push the pawn just yet. We're going to say they take. You're going to take that pawn back. They'll bring the bishop out very often, attack that knight. All of these are kind of natural moves up until now. You're going to swing the knight back, attack the bishop. He's going to go back. And when I say this, really, this is coming from like kind of first-hand experience of someone who's played as all the way up from, I started at like 400, whatever, 400, 500 elo, and have worked my up where, to where I am now. And I can say that once I learned this trap, it really, like, this, they almost always play this in my experience. So it might vary depending on the elo, but so anyhow, they're going to bring the bishop back. You're going to push the pawn, threatening to kind of, trap that bishop. So he's going to make some luft, and, an escape square. You're going to attack the bishop. Let's say he goes back. The move here, the big move is queen h5, basically threatening mate, on that f7 square. They have to address it. They often will play this, especially in bullet and blitz. And here is the big move, the even bigger move, is bishop to c4. You are now, and it's going to say it's a mistake, but honestly, if you're playing anything blitz, bullet, even rapid, depending on your elo, this is fine because there's still just a continuing threat of, even if they don't fall into this mate. So you bring this bishop out. Very often they're going to take that queen. They're going to think that you just now slipped. What you can do, and I think it's Amon was the one talking about this trap. He often recommended doing it super quickly, as if it were almost pre-moved but not quite, just to make the person think, oh, they just moved too quickly. They'll take that queen and they're going to get mated on f7 because the knight's covering the only other escape square. So that is, I cannot tell you how many times I have checkmated people, and it, like, in the matter of seconds, because once you get this down, it's just muscle memory. Instead of bishop out, let's just say something like this. Bringing the knight out. You are going to try to remember this move. This is just a common idea in this trap, because there's several different positions you can end up in where this trap continues. So you're going to line your queen up. Let's say they take. You're going here, take back with the queen. Let's just say, now let's look at, let's see here. Yeah, so you have this as well. You can start just getting kind of cheeky and putting pressure on that f7 square, because, if you're playing blitz or bullet, stuff like this, they will very often just see a free queen. So yeah, just keeping this idea of the knight covering the two squares, the bishop giving that checkmate. It's a common pattern to remember anyways, but especially if you're playing these two knights in the Caro-Kann. And just one other thing here. So let's say after you play the move bishop c4, they don't fall for the mate, and they play something very logical like e6 to block that diagonal. What you're going to do is swing the queen back to e2, and try to remember this pattern where you're kind of lining the queen up with the king, because this trap that you're setting up is that if they're not very careful, let's say they play something like knight d7, you have this tactic here where you're going to take on f7, forking the queen and the rook. They're going to take that knight. If not, I mean, it doesn't really matter at that point. They're flat out losing either way. But they're going to most likely take the knight and get mated on the f7 square once again. If they don't take that knight, I'm not going to go ahead and analyze that. I mean, you're going to be winning anyways. So just one thing to keep in mind here as well, because we're looking at this variation, I might as well show you, what happens if they push the pawn. This is already an inaccuracy. You're going to swing the knight back to e2, attacking the pawn. They will very likely just push their pawn, and just just to take a quick look at, in the event they push the pawn, which is already an inaccuracy, you're going to swing the knight back, very likely push c5. You are going to attack, challenge that pawn. Very likely they're going to push it, and you're going to continue attacking that pawn. They're going to continue pushing to c4, and you are going to, I thought I had this saved, but let's see here. Yeah, you're going to go queen a4 check, basically just picking up this pawn, no matter what. So they block here, you're picking up the pawn. If they block with the bishop, you're picking up the pawn. And very often you pick up that second pawn, and you're just, it's what a pretty big advantage for white. So, yeah, that is the Caro-Kann. Alright guys, this next one is the delayed Alapin Sicilian. Once again, I think I also picked this up from the Chessbrahs, so shout out to them, check out the channel. I believe a lot of these I picked up from the Building Habits series that Amon did. Super, super useful because it, goes through all the ELO ranges and just, like the title says, kind of all about building good habits. So, if you're an E4 player and you're going up against the Sicilian, I personally recommend playing the Alapin, like highly recommend, and it's not just me. I think I've heard several, grandmasters and teachers just talk about how brutal the Alapin is and just how solid of an opening. More specifically, I would actually recommend playing the delayed Alapin simply because, depending on your ELO, it leads into this trap, and it's just going to win you a lot of free, easy games. So the delayed Alapin with knight f3, what you're going to look out for is them playing this d6 move, because it's basically opening this diagonal to the king, which you're going to need for this trap. You're going to continue with c3, the kind of typical Alapin setup here. And let's first take a look at if they go with like a straight knight f6. You can go for the trap right away, and honestly I would recommend it. Like, I don't think, let's see, bishop e2. So it is like one of the top computer recommended moves here, but technically it's, I don't know, it's saying queen c2 is also a move, but anyways, go for the bishop e2. Very often they're going to take that pawn, they're going to think it's a free pawn, you're going to check the king, pick up that knight. Now let's take a look at if they don't play knight f6, but they play a probably more common move, knight c6 first. You're going to continue with like a very typical just Sicilian, right? You're going to push d4, they'll take, you'll take back, if, once again, they bring that knight out, you can actually go for the same trap. So you're just going to do the same thing, say, hey, take my pawn, feel free. But there's this sort of, you know, in-between move that's going to throw them off because, you know, the chances of them finding that trap without the second knight, without all of this, you know, these pawns here, they may or may not see it if they just take a second. The chances of them seeing that, okay, well, after I take this pawn, then they can push this pawn, you know, to d5 to threaten that knight, opening that diagonal for the check. The chances of them finding that are just, you know, pretty low unless they've studied this, unless they know about this. So especially if you're playing bullet and blitz once again. So yeah, you're going to pick up that knight once again. After this pawn d5 move, technically black's best move by far is queen a5 check. You will have some players find this. If they do, you know, it's just kind of how it is. You're not going to get them all. I believe the trap doesn't really continue. So after queen a5 check, you know, it's basically just going to go into, let's see, the top computer moves are just, yeah, knight c3. They take. You're going to take back, it looks like, and then it looks a little bit scary, but technically it's saying the white still has an advantage, because, you know, after you block that check, it's rook's covered by the queen, and you're looking actually pretty good. But it is not a free piece for you if they happen to find that move. So, all right, next we're going to take a look at the King's Gambit. This is something I learned from one of my previous chess coaches. If you come up against a King's Gambit, I recommend playing the Falkbeer Countergambit. I'm not sure how many people play this as black against the King's Gambit. All I know is that it's pretty nice because either way, if they find the correct move, or one of the correct moves, and they take on d5, you're going to thrust forward with e4. You know, you're going to be pushing that pawn forwards, controlling the square that the knight would like to come out of. It's an annoying pawn to have there. I'm not going to go into that because what we're looking at is more of the traps. Very often these King's Gambit players will make this huge mistake and take on e5 immediately going into this queen h4 trap, queen h4 check. This, depending on your elo, should look familiar. Whenever you have this check here, forking the king and the rook, it's just something to keep an eye out. In general, this is by no means the only opening where you're going to see this, but with the King's Gambit, all it takes is just this one, with this Falkbeer counter gambit, all it takes is this one wrong move, and they're in big trouble already from the opening. I mean, they're pretty much lost. Like, let's look at if they do take, and you end up here, like, you know, black is up with a massive advantage. So with this one, the Scotch, I just find that you need to know, like, you need to know some of these traps and be aware of some of them, because otherwise you can very easily fall for, you know, another trap of their own. So, yeah, so taking a look at just, you know, basic Scotch game, let's just say they take, you take, and instead of going into, you know, this variation, taking back with queen, let's say they play the move bishop c5. You're going to follow up. I'm not sure if the best move, so it's one of the top, it's one of the top recommended moves. It's just bishop e3. I recommend playing it. You don't have to, but simply because if they don't play the right thing, and, you know, take that, or basically if they're not careful and they don't address this undefended bishop, you're going to end up, let's just say they do something like knight f6. You have this knight takes c6, threatening the queen, and because, you know, they can take your bishop, but they're losing their queen, you're going to end up a piece. So what they'll probably do is take, you pick up the bishop, and that's a free bishop. So, like, this is just a common tactical idea, the fact that if you have an undefended piece, you got to look at, okay, well, what happens when I move my knight and attack that piece? Well, that knight is now attacking the queen, which is worth more than whatever this would be hitting after the bishop. So yeah, that one's pretty simple and easy, but I just found that it's good to know about. All right, next, this one has to be one of the biggest traps on YouTube. There has to be like loads and loads of videos. So I'm just throwing this in here because if you don't know about it, it's pretty good to know about. A lot of these traps are not like unique to just that specific opening, but it's kind of a recognizable pattern in certain positions. So this is the Legal's mate. That starts with a Philidor defense. So we're looking at a Philidor defense right here, and for me, you know, this is all pretty common up until now. It really, like, just keep an eye out for when and if and when they play the move bishop g4. That's where this kind of starts. You're going to play h3, and basically if they move back to h5, boom, that's it, the trap starts. You're going to take on e5. Again, this is, if this is blitz or bullet, they're very often going to see a free queen and take that free queen. They don't want to take the time to calculate, whatever. And they're walking right into Legal's mate. So you're going to take on, bishop takes on f7. The king cannot take that bishop because it's defended by the knight, even though it's being attacked by the pawn. It's just too slow. It doesn't have the, you know, doesn't have time to take the knight, and then you're delivering checkmate on d5. All right, guys, the final trap here is going to be with the Scandinavian. I myself play the Scandinavian sometimes. I've been easing off of it lately and doing some more like Caro-Kann and even e5, but so I can tell you that myself, you know, sitting at around like 1600, 1700 ELO, I studied it pretty well because you really have to study some of the theory without, you know, so you don't get your queen in trouble. And it's a kind of particular opening. I can tell you that very often I get my queen in trouble even after having studied enough. You know, when you need to play the c6 move to give your queen that escape square, I still sometimes will get in some trouble with my queen. So this is just something to be aware of. So yeah, so it starts with typical well, the Scandinavian opening. You are gonna be hitting that queen. This is like that knight c3 move you basically have to play, and it depends on whether they're going to play the queen a5 line or drop back to d8. If they drop back to d8, kind of just forget about it, at least for me. I mean, maybe there's still possibilities, but it's really with this queen a5 line. All right, so let's just take a look at this. After the queen a5 move, we're going to look at one of the candidate moves of playing d4. Let's just say this position ends up something like this. You're going to bring the bishop out. Important move to remember. On d2, x-raying the queen. And let's just say it continues. This is pretty common because black is getting ready to, well, they can put, I think, you know, the bishop on a couple squares. Sometimes it's going on one of those two. And they're looking to castle long. To do that, very often you're supposed to be bringing this knight out here. The problem with that is that if they're not careful, they are now unable to play the c6 move, allowing their queen to escape to either c7 or d8. So this is already something you should look out for. The fact that they no longer have that escape. You're going to play the move bishop b5 here. This is really where the trap is starting. They're already in a bit of trouble, I would say. If they're not careful, they're going to lose that queen. They might think, okay, this is a free bishop. It's not. You're going to fork the king and the queen. And if you look, otherwise, this queen is completely trapped. The knight's covering, you know, the knight and the bishop are covering all these squares. The bishops, actually. So that's a free queen, basically. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Feel free to also check out my Twitch and my Kick accounts where I'll be streaming. I also have a Journey to 1800 ELO where I'll be releasing rapid games every single day, so you can kind of follow my progress. And I also do some other gaming content like horror gaming and World of Warcraft, stuff like that. So check it out, hit the subscribe button if you like it, and thanks for watching.